we'll just go ahead and get started. I think you all know Ann Anderson. She is our speaker for today. She grew up in Topeka in the 50s, and she's been around the area. Then she went off to California. She has worked for the American Cancer Society. She's taught many tennis lessons, I believe, still teaching tennis lessons. And she's going to share what Topeka looked like at that time. And I'm going to say it looks a little like Mitford. Do you all know Mitford?
Yeah.
Mitford. Anyhow, and I'm Christine Steinkuhler. I'm the president of the Historical Society, and we do these once a week. Next week will be Mark Bradley. And I have to tell you, until he wrote his book and Mr. Totten's holding it up, I didn't realize that Topeka was evidently quite the spot for the witness protection program. Anyhow, he will be speaking about his experiences growing up in the witness protection program and his stepfather, who was in the Chicago Mafia and relocated here next week. I know. I find out something new all the time. Anyhow, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Christine. Actually, a little segue to that, when Van and I moved back here from San Diego, when I was working at Wood Valley Racket Club, people would come up and say, "Where did you move from?" I go, "San Diego." "Why would you leave San Diego?" So about the 20th time somebody asked me that, I leaned in and I said, "We're in the witness protection." Nobody else asked after that. So, at your chairs, like school, this is a little, if you remember back in the day, little library checkout thing. The Topeka County Library was always very important. And here's my little business card. So that's what's sitting at your chair, or you're sitting on it. So, once upon a time, around 1952, a girl was born, can you hear me?
Yep.
In Topeka, Kansas, the county of Shawnee. Her aunt, who was not very nice, told everyone that they found her in a reed basket down on the Kansas River after the 1951 flood. But in reality, she was actually born at the Stormontville Hospital, which originally was Christ Hospital, and then they merged. That kid was me. So I thought I was born into the Emerald City. Even better. I grew up on Parkview Street, across from Hughes Tennis Courts, and back in the day, Minniger's was at its height of operations, so there were always beautiful people down there playing tennis. They had a pro shop, and I got free popsicles because I would help clean up the trash. And the milk wagon from Bachman's, you remember Bachman's ice cream? That would flip-flop by our house and leave milk and neat little bottles on our porch. Gage Park was just 4 blocks from our house, and we could spend a whole day there. We could go through the zoo, we'd go to Animal Land, the big concrete animals. We'd play on the antique fire truck before there were codes and worry about kids falling through big metal things. And we also sat on the concrete lions, if you remember those, that guarded the entrance. And why they gave them away to Rossville, I have no idea.
But we still have them, and they're in good shape.
Anyway, they're still in the county. For basically the first 6 years, that's what I did, and we went to the biggest swimming pool I've ever seen, which was by the bathhouse, which is now Helen Hawker Theater. So interesting history at Gage Park, which I think opened in 1899. So I had a great aunt and uncle that lived in Silver Lake, and they farmed. I had an uncle who had a farm in Elmont. My grandparents' farm was out west on California Avenue near Barrington, near the old air base. And we had lots of family and friends and cousins that lived in Dover. And Dover was named after Dover, New Hampshire. I know you all knew that. Anyway, Dover was a place to get cheese, and at one time it was the two largest producers of cheese in the United States, which is kind of hard to believe, but that's true. So Dover was connected, the Southwest Trail, the Oregon Trail on the route through Topeka, and the Santa Fe Trail in Council Grove. And now today, K4 pretty much was Kansas' first paved highway, and it follows that trail originally there. My grandparents' first farm was off K4. It was right on Mission Creek, and that's where the wagons could cross. There were two places that were shallow enough, and that was one of them. So that's where my mom was born, and that's a little Dover history. Somerset Cafe is still there. Have any of you been there? Yeah. It's the most wonderful food and most wonderful pies. I think they were on Good Morning America maybe 12 years ago. Hi, Marilyn. Hi, Ann. Sorry. That's okay. Go to the principal's office. So Somerset Cafe has an interesting history too. And because you all are interested in history, like I am, when I go into a place, I want to know, what was it 50 years ago? What was it 100 years ago? I always think around Topeka and Shawnee County, there should be little stickers, which I'd say Lawrence does a good job where I live now, that says, this used to be Allen Landing Strip, now it's whatever, so that people know the history of what they're seeing. So Somerset Cafe, that building was originally owned by Alfred Sage. He built it, and it was known as Sage General Store in the late 1800s. It was then named Somerset Hall after his birthplace in Somersetshire, Bristol, England, which a lot of people that came here and migrated to any part in the Midwest named things after where they came from. Well, anyway, I kind of got ahead of myself. That's some Shawnee County history, and I think it's fun. I know there's world event history, and when you're in school, you're like, oh no, history. But I think of history as a living thing. Everything we do every day defines our history. What we've done in Shawnee County, where we live, that's our history. So, as Christine said, I'm Ann Anderson. Viola was my maiden name there, and I was raised in Topeka, Shawnee County, and my heart has always been tied to this place. I went to Crestview, and your brother is Mr.
My dad.
Oh, your dad, I'm sorry. Mr. Timken, my principal, small world. I went to Capper Junior High. Capper Junior High was wonderful. Again, a history of that. That was Washburn Rural High School originally, the older half, and my mom went there on 19th and Hope. That's since become Hope Academy. So an interesting history there. Topeka West is where I went to high school, and when I met Christine, I'm like, all right, Topeka West, and on Topeka West shirt. So it's all kind of weaves together. I worked in the governor's office after I got out of KU, and then I started being a volunteer for the American Cancer Society, and I really liked that, so I applied for a job with them, and I worked for them for 20 years in Kansas, Chicago, LA, San Diego. That's where I met my husband back there. He was my consultant. I married the consultant. We moved back here in 2005 because I really missed Topeka. I missed the prairie. I missed the lifestyle of this area. So I forgot to mention a little piece of fun history. Bob Keeshan and I worked together in the early 70s at Flaming Steer. Yeah, so that was the cool place to go. It was brand new, 37th Topeka Boulevard. He was an aspiring young waiter, and I was the hostess. And in my book, they tell about the armed robbery that happened there while I was working one night. So, growing up in this place, I really thought as a kid we had everything. My folks moved to the burbs in 1957 from Parkview, And we had a ranch-style house, mid-century house, which that term hadn't come up yet. It was 1,100 square feet. We thought it was a palace. We had a big yard, and I don't think for me, I don't think there's ever a better time, that decade of growing up. It was a boomer decade. It was certainly the 50s were not without their issues. A lot of soldiers that came back had developed alcoholism, and there was really, that kind of got shoved under the carpets. The civil rights program movement had barely begun, Brown versus Board of Education. And also there was the Korean War and the Korean conflict, as people called it. They didn't call it a war. And at school, we learned to duck under our desk, cover our head, and we could survive a nuclear attack. Or so they told us. We begged our mom to build a fallout shelter because we'd see the ones that had all the candidas and bunk beds, but she said, how about a tetherball pole? For many women in the 1950s, it was a challenging decade too, because it was, many of them during the war had become in charge of households, and then the men, the soldiers, their husbands came back, and their attitudes about all that changed a little bit. There were advice books and magazines. I love this article. Don't be afraid to marry young. And cooking to me is poetry. Boy, I have to read those. So, fortunately for me, my grandma and mom were pretty much a balance of that. They had the Searchlight cookbook, and they had recipes, but they really taught us to be your own person, and also my mom always says, don't let a boy win just to get him to like you. So my generation, I think, was probably the last generation that lived outside. We got up in the morning, ate Rice Krispies, 3 tablespoons of sugar, whole milk, toast made with jelly, and then rushed out the door in cutoffs, t-shirts, and usually barefoot. I don't remember, maybe except at Crest people wearing, they were called thongs back then. Now that's a different thing. But anyway, then we'd run home and we'd get a Velveeta cheese sandwich, Miracle Whip mayonnaise about that thick, on butter crust, not whole wheat, because that had not been invented. White bread, yum. And then we wash it all down with Hawaiian punch. You guys remember that? My brother and I would sit at the table and say, when we get jobs, we're going to eat this every day. I can't believe Mom doesn't want to eat this every day. When I was about 30, I was at the store one day and I saw all these things. I went, I'll try it. I was like, after we had lunch, we'd go down to Crestview Pool. If we had a quarter, and we would stay there from noon till 9, we had no sunscreen, we had the reverse, baby oil, iodine, cocoa butter, bake, turnover, transistor radios, 9th grade boys. It was great. We came back home at 6 for dinner. We ate as a family. That was very rare that we did not have breakfast and dinner as a family. It was just not even a question. My brother and I were expected to say something of interest, not funny, but something that we learned perhaps in school. And usually we did a pretty good job. We had meat, potatoes, vegetables, and a dessert. How my mom did all of that, I really don't know. When we were finished, we said, may we please be excused, which I don't know if any kid has uttered that in the last 30 years, maybe. And if my mom said yes, we would pick up our dishes, silverware, take it over, in the sink, and one of us would wash, one of us would dry. No dishwashers back then. After that, we'd go back outside and we'd play horse, shooting hoops. We had like 2 tennis rackets between us, so we take turns with tennis rackets. We had a couple of crummy mitts, so we played baseball. We had roller skates, the kind that you almost tied on your feet. And we'd go to the top of we had a really steep driveway, and one of us would stand at the bottom and yell, "Car." Not that it would have helped, because we just slid across the street. We didn't have a TV until I was about 5. And really after we had it, it wasn't turned on much. My stepdad watched the Walter Cronkite News, I believe. And Tuesday night was the George Gobel show. Why we liked that, I'm not really sure. I guess it was rated G and kind of a generic show, but Mom let us watch that. Saturday morning, we got to watch Mighty Mouse, My Friend Flicka, Sky King, and then the TV was turned off for the rest of the day. Saturday nights, usually my parents would watch the Jackie Gleason show, which Mom thought was a little R-rated for us. We were not allowed to watch Gunsmoke, except for my grandparents, because they didn't know the rule. I always remember, and I still think it would be a wonderful thing, at midnight, the Indian Chief logo would come on. Star Spangled Banner, static. TV's done. Go to bed. Don't stay up. 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, TV's back on. We had a morning and an evening Topeka paper, if you can imagine that.
Yeah, remember that? Yeah.
Don't get me started on that. That to me was a blessing. I mean, we sat at the table, all of us. Mom read us articles. We had to have current event articles in school. It was a very important part of our growing up. At school, we got the Weekly Reader, which I loved. It was such a fun little newsletter for kids, and I think it cost 10 cents or something to get them, but it was a very nice thing. In 5th grade, we discovered the National Geographics back in Mrs. Morgan's shelf, and the girls and boys were equally interested in naked people. So, I'm so pleased you guys are interested in those magazines. Don't come by to see what we're. We had board games, we had Chutes and Ladders, we had Candyland, Monopoly, Clue, and they were treasured and put away carefully. My nieces and nephew, who I adore so much, came over and we played Clue with my 1957 Clue. And I'm like, man, I can't believe you have all the pieces. Ours are gone like that. But I mean, we didn't have a lot of money to go buy new games. That was our game, and we treasured it. I still have Clue and Monopoly, and I just like looking at the little shoe and Colonel Mustard in the hall. We had a box of 64 Crayola crayons. We had tons of paper, and if we dared to utter on board, Mom was getting out the crayons and saying, make thank you notes to somebody, do something with crayons. We had a hula hoop that we shared. We had an unfinished single car garage because everybody had one car, and the dad took it to work, and that's how it worked. We had nails all over the unfinished, and we had mitts hanging up, and rakes, and other things that could fall off on you, and should never seem to. We walked to grade school, uphill, both ways, yep. Junior high we walked, and most of the time to high school, because really not very many kids had cars. I drive by Topeka West now where I went, and the cars are like everywhere. It's like everybody, they have 2 cars, I don't know, it's very different. We had bikes. We rode bikes everywhere. We got them at Western Auto, or if we were really lucky on layaway, we got one at Schwinn's. and we put the playing cards with not paper clips, clothespins on our spokes, and we ride up and down the street. Sounds so cool. I really love my schools, and I reflect back. I went to school with Sherry back there. Sherry and I were at kindergarten all the way through KU. And I reflect that there was such a richness then, but I also wonder how we did not die of food poisoning, because Mom would make us liverwurst sandwiches in our lunch pail. We put them up in the coat closet at 8:30, get them out at 12:30, loaded with mayonnaise, warming all morning, but we seemed to survive. We did our homework. It was not 6 hours like I think a lot of kids have now. It was a half hour or hour. So in case you're wondering, our house on 2227 Burnett Road cost the princely sum of $8,700 in 1956. It was three bedrooms, 1.5 bath, a galley kitchen about this wide, unfinished basement, and you know, somehow we managed to buy without granite countertops. We didn't have any walk-in closets unless you ducked and walked around. No open floor plan because we actually liked that you couldn't see everybody all at once. The full bath was decorated at the height of 50s imagination. It was pink, really pink like that, and black plastic tiles. And towards the end of when we had that house, we were gluing the tiles back on that would fall off. My mom took the half bath kind of her makeup, get away from everybody, and it was turquoise and black plastic tiles. In Topeka, if we got all A's on our report card, we went to Smacks Drive-In on Huntoon. Hamburgers were 15 cents. My mom would say, "Don't you like my hamburgers better? Great McCoy?" We're like, "No, Mom, we like these little greasy pots." We also went to Allen's Drive-In out on Topeka Boulevard. Amazing milkshakes. Going to the movies or any entertainment back in the 50s, pretty much everywhere was a rarity. I mean, unless you were very wealthy. And we just did not think of it. Once a summer, my cousin would come before back to school, and we could go to the movies. Mom would give us $1, drop us at the Grand or the Orpheum or Jayhawk. And back then, you could leave kids and expect they'd be there when you came back. Or we'd go roller skating, and we'd stay there 4 hours, rental skates, which I wouldn't do now, but we stay out there all the time, and I couldn't do it. Skate backwards, but anyway, it was fun. Fashion in the 50s, after the war, was starting to be a thing of interest all over the United States. And if you look at pictures of women in the 50s, including my mom, who was kind of a tomboy mom, when she had cocktail parties, and they had beautiful 18-inch waist dresses that puffed out and just gorgeous, off the shoulder, matching bags. I used to love in the summer to lay on their bed and watch Mom put a girdle on. It was like 98, we didn't have air conditioning. So for us kids had a little more clothing freedom starting. And usually my grandma or my mom sewed all of our clothes. She had a treadle sitting in her sewing machine, both of them. And again, we didn't think anything. That was normal. She'd go to Pelletiers, usually either downtown or one out on Holiday Square. And we'd always sit there because we love those vacuum money things. And some woman upstairs would put your change back in. That was so fun. Likes were from Western Auto. If any of you remember the corner of 21st and Gage, mecca of retail shopping. It's like all malls should be like that. There were the Fallies. Downstairs at the Fallies, you could go to their hardware store. There were freezers where you could buy half sides of beef and keep them there at Fallies. Next to that was Western Auto that had everything you needed. Duck Walls, you could go in there with 15 cents and come out with some good stuff. And then McDonald's department store was where we got, if we got store-bought clothes, that's where we got them. I remember first pair of Levi's I got was $6. And all the way home, Mom was like, $6? I was like, let's take them back. I don't want to hear $6 the rest of the time. I had saddle shoes almost from day one. I've got some pictures of me when I was like 2 wearing saddle shoes. And I still like them. They're cool, they're fun. Every year in the summer, usually we got 1 pair of white Keds. And I would be so careful with those, and if the little blue tag on the back got damaged, I was just crushed. I still have that little rubber tag on the back. We had black buckle boots that cut your fingers to pieces that we had to wear if we went up to Clinton Heights. And they would fill with snow. My mom put buttercrust bread bags over our feet with rubber bands, and then it just like encased in snow and freezing. But we didn't notice it. So I started writing little stories about all of this when I was in grade school. And my mom would read it, and usually she'd smile or say something about it. So I started thinking, this is a pretty good thing, writing words, making some little pictures. So after I'd written it, she put it up on our Frigidaire with some tape. And when we got about 10 of those, I'd make a beautiful cover, and we'd staple it together, and those became everybody's Christmas gifts. And they pretty much knew they were going to get one of my books for Christmas. So I've always been writing about the day-to-day, the history of the place, my love for this area, Topeka, Shawnee County, all the little towns. Like I love going to Rossville for the Tall Corn Festival, Silver Lake. There's so many places to go, not just Topeka. And I think when you get out, you see an appreciation for the heritage that we have here in this county. In 2015, I got a little flash drive in the mail, and it was of about 50 posts that I'd written on Facebook. And when I joined Facebook in 2008, I made a solemn pinky swear promise. I would not unfriend somebody over politics. I would not get in a fight. That's just not my personality. So again, I wrote about the things I cared about. And my friend sent me this flash drive, and she said, these are my favorite posts. You should write a book. Okay, that's interesting. So then I started getting other comments from readers I didn't know. Oh, I love this. I hope you're writing a book about this. So I'm like, okay, universe. I get it. I'll write a book. So this became my book, Posts of a Mid-Century Kid. And this is me. I always have some cats in my arm. This is our 57 Buick convertible with the oil stain that my publisher wanted to Photoshop out. And I said, no, everybody in the 50s changed oil in their driveway and had a big oil stain. It was a badge of pride. The book really is a love story to Kansas, to my family, to friends, to everything about me growing up, my history. And it said that in childhood, you look at the world once and the rest is memory. And my cousin one day said, I don't think it happened that way. And I said, well, my book. I was at a grandma's that day. I go, whose grandma? She goes, my grandma. I go, Linda, that's my grandma. And she went, she's 5 years old. She goes, it was my grandma too. And I went, oh, I hadn't really thought that through. So it's interesting how you see your world. I'm working on the next book. It's called The Adventure of the Bottle Cap. And it's a true story, mostly, about a calf that was rescued by my grandpa on a blizzardy night at their farm out in California. That's the artist is Sarah Long. And it will be a read aloud, but it's again about saving this little calf and my grandma falling in love with it. I'm working on another book that is more of the, if you're on Friends of the Flint Hills Facebook site, I write a lot about my love for the Flint Hills, so it'll be about that. So that's kind of how the book came to be. If you want to know, it takes about 7 years to get a book, unless you're doing it full time. And you want to embrace rejection. The first time I sent this to University Press of Kansas, I sent them the whole thing, 150,000 words, and they wrote back 3 months later, "Thank you, we enjoyed it. It's too big, it needs to be edited, but it's marketable." And I ran around the house going, "I got rejected by the University Press of Kansas." I was so excited and can't that happened. And I was like, "I got rejected." I thought that was great. I learned, finally got it published. So I thought we might read a couple of stories from the book, and then we'll talk a little bit. I have over at the other table, some of you might be interested if you like maps. I put a map in the front of the book, and these are places in Topeka, Shawnee County, all the way out to Colorado. And this was where we lived in the 50s and 60s. So this is, we had an alley behind our house on Parkview. So one of the things that happens when you grow up in the 50s is you get cataract surgery. Everybody got that? So I'm going to get some glasses for this. All right. So our house on Parkview had a dirt alley behind it, and a single car garage, of course. So I was thinking about alleys one day, and I wrote this little story. I thought of our alley on 720 Parkview today. I would guess most people don't know or think about alleys anymore. But as a kid, it was like having a playground at the edge of our backyard. Across the street, out our front door, was Hughes Tennis Court, which was bustling with activity. When we stepped out our back door, the alley beckoned with a quiet place to explore, to find lost coins and keys, and to see our neighbors' lives through the back of their houses. A line of swing sets, playhouses, and trees for climbing all magically appeared to us, just by crossing the alley. Cat pictures. We had many kid meetings in the alley to plan our day, decide where our bikes would take us, find roly-poly bugs. You guys know what those are?
Oh, yeah.
And maybe just rummage in our garages and look for buried treasure. During the daytime, in our garages, and we would find a dirt-free way of kid fun and a grand place to sit on the ground and play with our various cars and trucks. We had a stone wall that ran along our alley in our backyard. Mom told my brother and me that roly-poly bugs were made into butterbrickle ice cream. She said the little bugs were toasted and tossed into vanilla ice cream. Sometimes she would tell us if we went out by the stone wall into the alley and caught a milk bottle full of roly-polies, she would take them to the store and bring back the butterbrickle ice cream. My brother and I would go about the 3-hour task, filling up a milk bottle with the bugs and presenting it to my mom. She would take it and then drive around and return with the promised ice cream. I was probably 10 before I figured out she just found a way to keep us busy. Next time I'm out driving, I think I'll drive down our old driveway and see what changes have brought since the 50s. Then I might stop and get some roly-poly ice cream. So my mom, like probably most moms, always seemed to redirect our energies, and the roly-poly was pretty much a classic of getting us to do something else. This one is about Topeka. And again, I love Topeka. We'd go, my stepdad was an attorney. He worked at First National Bank building, which as a kid I thought that must have been right out of Superman movie because it was Art Deco, bronze, gold. It was just beautiful. So this is my homage to downtown. Downtown. I remember going to my first dance in the 8th grade at Capper Junior High. I was wearing my first pair of real stockings and dancing to Petula Clark's Downtown. I hear that song and always think of the 8th grade dance. As kids, we referred to downtown Topeka as going to town. And though it was less than 10 minutes from our home, it was always an adventure. Downtown Topeka was a vibrant place where we shopped, for most of our store-bought clothes, as malls had not yet been invented. Some of my back-to-school clothes were happily purchased at Pelletier's department store, with its super neat tube system for taking your money to some mystery place upstairs and returning your change. My stepdad would usually stop in Ray Beers for a new tie or just to chat. We would take our film to Wolf's Camera Shop and wait with excitement the whole week it took to be developed. Sometimes we would visit the state capitol building, filled with massive murals painted by John Stewart Curry. As kids, we always scooted by the John Brown mural called Tragic Prelude. It gave us the creeps. There were special occasions celebrated downtown at the Hotel Jayhawk with this iconic neon Jayhawk on top and the elegant Hotel Kansan where my grandparents celebrated their 50th anniversary. The downtown restaurants were equally magnificent. The Senate Cafeteria, Maynard's with their delicious pies and rolls, and my favorite, the Chocolate Shop. Does anybody remember that? It was located near Pelletier's, and my grandma would occasionally take me there. I wore my good clothes and put on my white church gloves. It was downstairs, and the owner kept all of his money in a cigar box. Downtown was also the theater district. There were no mega theaters, and going to a movie was a treat and a delight. The Grand Theater, the Jayhawk Theater, the Orpheum Theater, and the Dickinson Theater all beckoned with their velvet seats, brightly lit snack bars, and most of them had young men with flashlights and snappy uniforms to guide you to a seat. The movies always began with black and white newsreel we endured, the bonus cartoon followed by the feature film. Mom would drop my brother and me off with our movie money, and sometimes money to buy popcorn, a drink, or candy. My brother and I occasionally opted for the giant dill pickles, and they puckered up our mouths for an hour. My stepdad was a lawyer and worked at the Majestic Bank building in Sixton, Kansas. It was an Art Deco building and so beautiful. Our school field trips always included a visit to the Kansas Museum. I thought it was the most gorgeous building I had ever seen, and I never tired of walking up the marble steps and wandering the floors of history. My favorite exhibit was the Native American teepee. I wanted to go in there and sit with them around that light bulb fire that was always burning. Downtown was a place we could always go. I'm still humming that song. So, again, when you don't know what you don't know, things seem pretty wonderful. And I remember my cousins that lived in Alma thought to come into Topeka for a week was just Disneyland. And for my brother and me to go out to their farm in Ballin, 500 acres of cows and pigs, and we thought that was a vacation. So it's all from your perspective. The last one I want to read is something about the prairie, and I write about that a lot. And then if anybody has any questions, I'm going to sign some books and we'll open the bookstore. But I'll be around if you guys have questions. The Flint Hills, when I was growing up, was what we went through to get to Colorado. Nobody paid much attention to it. One thing that's nice since we moved back is it's really come to its own being as far as such a treasure. not only for Kansas, but for the world to have this last tiny piece of grassland left. So this is just a little story I wrote actually yesterday on Friends of the Flint Hills. Snow shower on the Flint Hills. Do you know that sound of an old saddle as you shift and hear its happy leather creak? Reins that feel like velvet cords laying softly across your hands and running down to the sweetest horse you've ever known. Bend down and grasp the coarse, silky mane, the smells of the prairie nights and green, sweet grass of summer. Clip-clop, atop the high Flint Hill, we stop. Dream of blue swallows cutting the air and the first wildflowers to poke through spring's ashy burn. But tonight, the tiny crystal snowflakes swirl in the north breeze, confused by a pink gold sunset. I pull on my gloves that have felt 40 winters and bear the patches and stitches I've made on them. What shall we hear in the Flint Hills on this January night? We hear the prairie air, cool and slow, breathing from the earth. We hear the gentle rustle of the wind, stirring the dried grasses, and the light sound of the tiny feet of a field mouse, making it safely to a lone fallen tree. What of this magic ancient grass wilderness? Where is the rest of it gone? Could Pony and I find it beneath the road, building a city? Could we save it again by pulling off the cover, letting the prairie see light and grow her grasses and animals, and launch 1,000 red-tailed hawks back into the sky blue? I step down to the prairie earth. My horse nuzzles me, knows I have an apple to offer. I bend down to hold the flint against my palm, knowing it offers my heart her song, her notes a tonic for me. Good night, Flint Hills. Sleep well, and we will walk back with a look over our shoulder. So I'm always writing love stories, I guess, to the Flint Hills. So that's kind of what it was like to grow up in the 50s. I truly feel blessed that I grew up in that time, and I know some of you did too, or have friends and family. And anybody have any memories they have they want to share? One thing I would say about that I've encouraged people is, you're one generation away from losing the story. So if you will learn to interview somebody, it doesn't have to be a book. It can be a little scrapbook. I was blessed with a lot of family pictures. However, knowing who was in the picture, a lot of pictures didn't have anybody in it. So if you can write or put a sticky note, that's so helpful, because the next generation might not be interested now, but eventually they will be. So that's something I encourage you to do. The last thing I always tell people that are listening to my story is there is an off button on your iPhone, on your phone. Did anyone know that? You can actually turn it off. You can set it down. It doesn't have to be with you. And you can enjoy a whole day, like when we had a beige wall phone, only one in the house, and had a long cord, so you could maybe talk to your boyfriend, everybody listening. So I encourage you, have a deviceless day. Encourage your family not to bring iPhones and laptops to the table. I think that's become really the demise of family dinners. But that's just me. I have cats, so they don't bring stuff to the table. So I really appreciate you guys being here. If there aren't any questions, I'm going to be over. Yes?
I could. Do you have Mr. Timken at Crestview?
Pardon me?
Did you have Mr. Timken as a principal?
I did.
Did he walk down the hall on the sands in your area? No, he taught me how to walk on. I mean, he actually, as a reward, would walk down. He literally walked down the whole.
I heard of him doing
on the
that.
sands.
I don't think I actually saw that.
You must have been so proud of you. Because
No.
I just
he did. I did.
to walk on my hands. I was his only daughter. And I had a good vertical jump I could never walk on my hands. When he had cancer. And after his first cancer surgery, about 1990, he went to a swimming pool out north. And he's kind of a little bit of a show off, if you remember. And he went out on the diving board. And on that diving board, he knew the rules, but he stood on his hands.
And then let go.
And then let go. And that was after his first cancer surgery. Right. He got whistled. But anyway, so thank you for remembering my dad. It means a lot to me. And yes, he did
He
that.
was wonderful.
In Polk School, he was there before we all went to school. And he walked up the stairs on his hands.
That is really hard to do.
That's great. Yes.
Only remark to that is that I was lucky enough to marry into that family.
Wow. Did you have to walk on your hands to?
Thank goodness, no. I got to marry her without having to do that.
Well, we were really, really blessed. I know still, like Christine is an amazing professor, teacher, and that's such a role model in your life if you have a good teacher or a principal to get you through difficult times or good times. So, Christine, do you want to do drawing now, or?
I will let you do it.
Okay, well, let's see. What's the contest? I'll say, who's lived in Shawnee County the longest? 20 years?
76.
30 years? 40 years? 50 years?
76.
Oh. 76 years?
Born and raised. Live in Rossville.
Congratulations.
Say that I've read Ann's book, and it is the most delightful, heartwarming book. It's like I'll read it on my memory too. Except she says it in a much nicer way. She is the best writer.
I'm determined to keep a history piece.
It's a great gift.
And sometimes Sherry and I'll write a book about when we were KU years, but we have to wait till everybody's dead. So I'm going to brag on Christine. She made my great Aunt Vivian's $1 million fudge, which is Mamie Eisenhower's recipe. So you should get some of that. And orange fluff, which I have not seen since the 50s. So I hope it all will.
We had a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So go help yourself, and I'm going to thank Dawn, and thank all of you for being here, and Christine and Bob, and let's go get some food and